All right, guys, what's going on? So we're back, and in this video, I'm going to show you guys something cool that we're going to then lead into. But first, let's go get a little update on everything that's been going on around here. So, like you guys saw in the last video, my tuner bailed on me, and I'm just working on tuning the car. That resulted in needing to go get a wide band and stuff like that, since it'll primarily be done on the street, not so much on a dyno, where like a lot of dynos have their own wide bands and things like that. So the car's been sitting, hanging out here. Haven't really done much to it. However, I've been tweaking with the tune and stuff like that. I pretty much got the MAF sensor all dialed in, like I mentioned in the last video. But in order for me to put a wideband on this car properly, I need to get an exhaust built. So I was talking with Chris, and he sent me a picture of how his exhaust is configured, and I think what I'm going to end up doing is going into a single exhaust and having it come out the back left side. I want to get a base model rear bumper with a single exhaust cutout and just run like a big 3.5 or 4 inch single exit exhaust on this car. That will make removing it a lot easier under the car, instead of trying to remove a big dual system, which you guys have seen me struggle with on this and on that. And it'll just make things a lot easier with having space to work under the car. So once an exhaust is made and a wideband is installed, I'll then continue with the whole tuning adventure, because then I'll be able to start dialing in the VE tables and speed density, even though I still haven't really decided if I'm going to be on a MAF, run MAF, or run speed density, or run MAF and have speed density all set up so that if the MAF does fail at the track, I can disable it and switch over to speed density to keep me on the track. But whatever it may be, I want to, basically tune both of them, and having a wideband will allow me to tune it properly and tune it safely. One of those things that gets me excited is things that make life at the track a lot easier. Morgan got me a Predator 2000 quiet generator. A lot of my friends run these at the track. They're basically the replicas of the Honda generators. They're awesome, they're quiet, and I'm pretty stoked for overnight events to have that this year. I've been spending a lot of my time, like last weekend, I was working on the Suburban. I did new front brakes and a Yukon diff cover, which I'll show you guys. Front brakes are front brakes, but I did this diff cover right here. It is for like off-roading. It's kind of funny, but basically my issue was that I couldn't fill it because my fill plug was demolished. So I had to, in turn, get a really fancy Yukon diff cover that has a drain and fill plug on it. So put that on. It was kind of tough because every bolt on the diff cover went from a 13 millimeter from the factory to like a 12.5. And thankfully for this little Irwin kit here, I have one still that I got to hammer a bolt out of, but it's like these reverse sockets that I guess you want to call it, but they basically bite into rounded off bolts. That came in handy. So now mainly what this video is about is a new part that I have, and like I mentioned in a previous video, I'm working on the toe arms, and I really want to ultimately start creating suspension, and not just suspension, but just parts for the cars that I've basically come to learn a lot about, and then maybe see what it grows into with other chassis and whatnot. So not going too far into it, but we basically have a new part to try. And a lot of these parts, like I have all the stuff done. I know what they're going to sell for. It's just a matter of getting them on the red car and testing. Testing is the big thing, or getting them out to some guys to test for me. So let me show you what came in today, and let me show you what we're going to be test fitting on the car to move forward in getting a final product. Now you guys saw toe arm version 1, toe arm version 2, just waiting for my BC coilovers to get here, and then we will get those on the car. Well, the version 2 on the car, and we will be good with that. But the newest thing, you guys have heard me mention that I was working on a dual caliper bracket. So dual caliper bracket version 1 was a cardboard template. Version 2, my buddy Andrew Fisher, he 3D printed basically a scanned version of this. I scanned it into the computer and I was like, here, 3D print this. So he outlined, he 3D printed it. We test fitted it on the knuckle. We got it to a good point, drilled some holes. His version didn't have holes, so I was like, yeah, I'll figure out where the holes have to be once I have it. Drilled some holes, and then Morgan traced it, and I sent it over to Send Cut Send last week, and I just got the first version of the CTS-V dual caliper bracket. It's cut out of 1/4 inch steel, so it matches this 3D printed version. And right now I just got raw steel so that I can finish dialing it in, but they do offer powder coated options. So down the line, if I can just basically order batches of these and offer them to you guys, we can do some kind of powder coated option for good finish. These I'll probably just end up painting or maybe hit them with some Steel It before they go on the car. But super quality piece, 1/4 inch steel, nothing crazy, holes drilled. Like these things, they're not even drilled, they're cut out on the plasma table, but these things came out so good, and I'm really excited to try and mount this base model caliper on using and having it fit on the car. And basically all I need to do now is just figure out the spacing that I need between the bracket. Obviously this is exaggerated because of these bolts, but basically between the bracket and the caliper bracket to basically get this to seat properly on the rotor, like basically be centered on the rotor. So once that's dialed in, I just got to go get some bolts for these, and then we can get that sorted out. But once it's dialed in, we're good to go. We're gonna get it bolted up to the car. I got to get my hands on one more base model caliper, and these work for base model CTS calipers. However, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Mike. He is another CTS drifter, and he was saying that on his base model, he started with a base model, did basically a full V conversion with a Iron Block LS and a CD09, which is pretty rad. But he was saying that Brembo's bolted right up to his rear hubs. So I'm thinking that if these fit on the car, the base model calipers, they're cheap, they're like 30 bucks a pop, 35 bucks a pop. If these fit on the car, and then Brembo's also fit, I think the only difference might be like the spacing. So the spacer that would have to go in between the bracket here and the caliper when you bolt it up, I think that would be the only difference as to running a base model caliper or a Brembo. So it kind of gives a alternative to, you know, if you want to be more cost friendly and just simpler single piston, or if you want to go to a, I think they're a 4-piston but smaller Brembo caliper that are around like 125 a piece. So it just depends on, you know, how crazy you want to get with it. So I already have a handbrake mount plate in the car. Once I have my front seat, then I will be able to finalize mounting that. And I was going to just do AN lines throughout the whole thing for the dual caliper setup, but I have enough of this Nylock or Nycop brake line that you guys saw previously when I was basically putting the rear subframe back in. I think I have enough of that I can definitely make a setup. All I need to go buy is a little T-fitting, and I definitely have enough fittings to make it work. So the last thing I just need to do as far as that goes is buy a dual caliper or handbrake. So we're going to FD Orlando in a few weeks, so I plan on picking up I'm going to go there with the intentions of picking up like an ASD or something like that from Drift HQ. I want to see what they have on display there. It'll save me some money on shipping, so you know, I'll just wait. I don't need it right now, so I'll wait till FD Orlando and I'll just grab one from them when they're at the track. So we're going to move into the next part of this video. We're going to move into test fitting this thing. I think I'm going to end up having to open up one of these upper holes for the caliper, but I really won't know until it's bolted to the car just from like holding it up against the caliper itself. And then what I'll end up doing, if I have to open it up now, what I'll end up doing is I'll have Morgan in the design file move this hole down. I think it's going to be like a ½ an inch, move it down, and then that'll line up perfectly for moving forward. So let's get started. We're going to jump into it and start test fitting this thing on the car. All right, you guys, so here we are. Got everything disconnected. Basically all I did was take the caliper off. So it's these two bolts out of the knuckle and took the rotor off to go along with it. So I have our passenger side piece here, like so. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but I think I am gonna have to make an adjustment to this hole, but it is ultimately gonna tuck somewhere like this. Yeah, somewhere like that. So let's see if we can get this thing to fit, and if any changes need to be done, it'll utilize this knuckle hole right here, this factory bolt for the knuckle, the top one, and then these two holes right here that used to have the parking brake bracket, the cable bracket. It'll utilize those as well, and we'll see how it all fits. I had to go out and buy some hardware, so I bought some new grade 8 caliper bolts, just 40 mils, and some washers to figure out any gaps that I may have to fill or whatnot. And then I bought these guys to run through the knuckle and into it as well. They might be a little long, but for testing sake, you know, they'll probably work. They got a little extra on the back side. You can always cut that down and just buy shorter bolts next time. But this is all for testing purposes and figure out what works and what doesn't. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I think I can loosen this guy. So for our lower perch here, I think I can go ahead and just loosen that one. I don't think I need to fully take this one off, because then you relieve the tension of the spring, and it kind of can be a pain in the butt sometimes. So as long as that's loose enough that the knuckle can rotate in and out on it, but I will have to take off the toe arm right here. And I'm also kind of contemplating maybe trying to get this toe arm out and test fitting my my toe arm. We'll see how the dual caliper bracket stuff goes. We'll start off with that. And then once this is out, we'll loosen the bolt down here for the shock. And I don't know if we'll have to take the trailing arm off or if that'll give us enough ability to move it, because basically we need to move the knuckle forward enough to be able to get the axle to push through, and then for us to have enough clearance to pull this bolt out. So it might not take much. I think we might be able to get away with it, which is, you know, breaking every other bolt loose, but only taking off the toe arm and this upper control arm. So some new grade 8 caliper bolts, just 40 mils, and some washers to figure out any gaps that I may have to fill or whatnot. And then I bought these guys to run through the knuckle and into it as well. They might be a little long, but for testing sake, you know, they'll probably work. They got a little extra on the back side. You can always cut that down and just buy shorter bolts next time. But this is all for testing purposes and figure out what works and what doesn't. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I think I can loosen this guy. So for our lower perch here, I think I can go ahead and just loosen that one. I don't think I need to fully take this one off, because then you relieve the tension of the spring, and it kind of can be a pain in the butt sometimes. So as long as that's loose enough that the knuckle can rotate in and out on it, but I will have to take off the toe arm right here. And I'm also kind of contemplating maybe trying to get this toe arm out and test fitting my my toe arm. We'll see how the dual caliper bracket stuff goes. We'll start off with that. And then once this is out, We'll loosen the bolt down here for the shock, and I don't know if we'll have to take the trailing arm off or if that'll give us enough ability to move it, because basically we need to move the knuckle forward enough to be able to get the axle to push through, and then for us to have enough clearance to pull this bolt out. So it might not take much. I think we might be able to get away with it with just, you know, breaking every other bolt loose, but only taking off the tow arm and this upper control arm. So by popping this upper control arm out, just kind of pushing it out of the way, I was able to push the axle back out enough that we now have enough room to pull this hub bolt out all the way, like so. So then our bracket will sit in like this. Truthfully, I got a little nervous about fitment, but we're looking good so far. So I ended up putting 2 M12 washers behind this bolt for the hub, and that offset that gap that there was there, because as you can see right in here, there is a lip there for the bolts for the handbrake bracket. So those 2 washers there did in fact offset it, I think pretty perfectly from what I can tell. And like I said, I mentioned these 2 bottom bolts, the ones I bought were way too long, so I'm gonna have to get some shorter ones because each one has 10 washers on it on the backside. But at least for test fitting purposes, you know, they'll be fine. They're not gonna get in the way. But that's just strictly test fit. So I'm not gonna be like pulling the handbrake anytime soon. I don't have a handbrake, so that'll work. Those of you guys that have seen the handbrake bracket on the 3000, you know how the calipers are spaced properly on that. So I will also comment that stacked spacers or stacked washers do still function completely fine. So we're mounted. We are mounted up here. I think what I'm going to do next is kind of just pull this guy up, snug this bolt so there's not as much wiggle in it, and then I'll put the rotor hat on, and then I will get the caliper, and we'll see if the caliper will fit. Like I said, I think I'm gonna have to make this hole a little bit bigger because it is gonna have to come down a little bit. All right, guys, so we have the caliper bracket bolted up here. Turns out I'm gonna have to move this upper hole up just a hair, maybe like a 1/4 of an inch upward to have it in the proper spot. But I ended up drilling it out a little bigger just to get the space I needed, and we pretty much have it on. So now what I'm going to do is get the rotor on, see where the rotor sits in relation to this guy, and then figure out how far out this needs to be spaced, if any, in order to get the pads to sit properly in here. But I think I am gonna, from the looks of it, I think I'm gonna have to space it out a little bit, but we will see. So let me pop this back off and throw the rotor on and see where we're at. All right, so I got the caliper bracket bolted on, and I have the pads slid in. Now, obviously, you know, there's gonna be some movement in here because the bolts aren't tight, and I'll show you why, but they're basically gonna sit to where obviously the pad isn't gonna cover the entire rotor surface because these Brembos are larger. However, they are going to seat on the rotor completely. They'll just be right there at the outside edge of the rotor. Now, in order to tighten up this slot that I have right now, you can see down in here, that is the gap that I have to close up. Now, I have some spacers down in the other garage that I'm going to go get there for the 3000, the steering that I never really ended up using. So I'm going to see if I have any that are about that length, and those are the steel spacers that I'm going to end up needing for these brackets and for these. Now, I don't know, I guess I theoretically, if I wanted to take that knuckle or that caliper off, I can test fit for Brembos, but that will be down the line. I want to get these things ironed out as to how I'm going to use them first. So then we have our caliper body itself here, and that'll just slide on. I gotta push this caliper pin in. I'll just slide on and slide over. And we'll get the bolts in. So this thing does have a weird little cutout shape in the back, but that is basically to clear where the piston goes right here, this area. So I'll shine the light up in here and you guys will see in a sec. So look at that. We got a caliper mounted. Like I mentioned, that little cutout shape in the back here, you can see there, that is basically just a loop around the caliper itself. We are looking pretty good here, guys. So I'm gonna run to the back garage and let's go see if I have a spacer that is about 1 inch. Basically, when I made the front suspension or the steering angle kit for the 3000, I made these, I got extra bolts with tie rod, bump steer correction, and I'm thinking these ones might be the right size that I need. Will the 1 inch work? Maybe. What I did was, you see the little tabs right there for the pad slides. I centered them on the rotor by hand. Took the spacer here, put it up on the bracket. Basically came to the conclusion that, well, they're not centered right now, but came to the conclusion I drew that little black line. That is how long of a spacer that I need. And I'm gonna take a guesstimation, say 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna measure that, but then I will order some spacer sleeves. I think I ordered these guys online, probably on Speedway or something like that, or Summit. So I'll order them up, but for the time being, I'm gonna mock this whole entire thing up, hang that caliper as well, and see what it looks like actually mounted. There we go. We have a Brembo foot brake caliper. We have a base model handbrake caliper. You guys don't need another set of Brembos for the rear of these things to lock up the rear wheels. Trust me, a lot of guys use tiny Willwoods and they grab. You just gotta put, you know, an aggressive pad in there. So I'm pretty hype on this. It's just a matter of making the adjustment on that upper hole, getting the proper size spacer to center the caliper in, like, over the rotor. So I'm pretty hype. It's looking pretty good. It's I'm gonna keep going on and rambling on and on about how I'm hype about it, but you guys get it. You know, we're making good progress here. So once these are finalized with the proper size bolts, proper size spacers right here, we do a final test run. We get this whole location ironed out. From there, they'll move the testing, and I might send a set out for someone else to test first, because I'm not gonna be able to test these until the fall. So I would rather get some real world data and testing in on these first, sooner than later, so that I can start offering them to those of you guys that are interested. So I think I'm gonna wrap the video here. I'll tackle the tow arms in another one when it's daylight out. This garage that I'm in up here, it doesn't have the best lighting, so I'm working under the spotlight, and I hate just working under the car with a bunch of spotlights around, and it'll be way easier in the daytime. So maybe this weekend we'll tackle at least mocking up the tow arm on this side, and hopefully by the weekend I will have some sort of spacer that will fit. And don't mind garage Jesus right here, he came with the house. I'm really happy with the progress that I made tonight by doing it, and actually, you know, having a piece in hand. And really, it's just a couple small changes and it'll be good to mount to the car. Every time I make something, this is the worst part, when it's like I buy a bolt, it's a little short, it's a little long, I gotta go back to the store, I gotta go back to Home Depot, it's 20 minutes away, it's like a whole process. This is the worst part when it comes down to it. But yeah, I'm hype. I hope you guys are hype as well. Thank you for watching this video if you're still here. And I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you drop a comment, like this video, and yeah, have a good night.